You ever get a phone call that feels like a punch to the gut? The kind that makes your whole world tilt sideways before you can even take a breath? That's what happened to me, Emily Harper, on a rainy October afternoon in Chicago in 2023. And let me tell you, it was just the beginning of a nightmare I never saw coming. I'm 38, a high school English teacher, mom to two incredible kids, Lily, 9, and Max, 6. And I thought I was the happily married wife of James Harper, a 42-year-old sales executive who'd been my rock for 12 years. But that day, with one call, I found out James had been living a double life. With another family, another wife, and the only reason I discovered it was because of a car accident that nearly killed him. So if you're ready for a story that'll keep you on the edge of your seat, stick around, because this one starts with a bang and doesn't let up. I was in my classroom at Lincoln High, surrounded by a chaos of half-graded essays on The Great Gatsby, when my phone lit up on the desk, buzzing like it knew something I didn't. It was 2:47 p.m., and the last of my students were shuffling out, their laughter echoing down the hall as I tried to pack up for the day. I glanced at the screen, Chicago General Hospital, and my heart stopped. I answered, my voice trembling, expecting maybe a school emergency. But the nurse on the other end, a woman named Sarah with a clipped professional tone, said words that hit me like a freight train. Mrs. Harper, this is about your husband, James. He's been in a serious car accident on I-90. He's in surgery now, and it's critical. You need to get here immediately. I didn't even hang up. I just dropped the phone, my hands shaking as I grabbed my purse, my keys, my coat, and bolted out of the classroom, nearly knocking over the principal in the hallway. Emergency. Family. Sorry. I stammered, not waiting for her response as I ran to my car, a beat-up Subaru Outback parked crookedly in the faculty lot. James, my James, in a car accident? He was supposed to be in Milwaukee for a sales conference, not on I-90. Not anywhere near Chicago. My mind was a storm of panic as I sped through the city, the rain slamming against my windshield. Wipers barely keeping up, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. I kept picturing him, his warm brown eyes, his crooked smile, the way he'd kiss my forehead every morning before leaving for work. We'd been married for 12 years, together for 15, and he was my everything, the father of my kids, the man I'd built my life with. He couldn't be hurt. I couldn't even think the word. I got to Chicago General in 20 minutes, a record for rush hour traffic, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum as I sprinted to the ER desk, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I'm Emily Harper, I said, my voice barely audible over the chaos. Beeping monitors, doctors shouting orders, a woman sobbing down the hall. My husband, James Harper, he was in an accident. Where is he? I need to see him. The nurse behind the desk, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a name tag that read Marla, looked up from her computer, her brow furrowing as she typed something into her system. James Harper, yes, he's in surgery, she said, her voice hesitant. But I'm sorry, ma'am, his wife is already here. She's in the waiting room. I can't let you in until we confirm. His wife? I cut her off, my voice rising sharp and jagged, my hands slamming down on the counter. I'm his wife. I'm Emily Harper. There's no way. There must be some mistake. Marla's face paled, her eyes darting to her clipboard, then back to me, her voice faltering. I'll need to check with the doctor, ma'am. Please, just wait here. I didn't wait. I couldn't. I stormed toward the waiting room, my pulse pounding in my ears, my mind spinning with confusion and rage. Another wife? That was insane. James and I were married. I had the ring on my finger, the photos on our mantle, the kids who called him Daddy. There couldn't be someone else. But when I pushed open the door to the waiting room, there she was, sitting in a plastic chair, her head in her hands, a crumpled tissue in her fist. She looked up as I walked in, and time stopped. She was younger than me, maybe early 30s, with long blonde hair that fell in perfect waves, even in her distress, and a face that could have been on a magazine cover. High cheekbones, full lips, the kind of beauty that turns heads. She was wearing a tight black dress that hugged her curves, her makeup smudged from crying, and around her neck was a gold necklace I knew better than my own reflection. A pendant James had given me on our 5th anniversary, a delicate heart with an engraving that said forever. I'd lost mine years ago, or so I thought, and he'd replaced it with a new one. But there it was, on her, the original, the one I'd loved. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat as I realized what I was seeing. This woman, this stranger, was wearing my necklace, calling herself my husband's wife. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with rage, my hands clenched into fists at my sides, my nails digging into my palms. She stood up, her eyes wide, her lips trembling as she clutched the tissue like a lifeline. I'm Rachel Harper," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, cracking on the last word. "James's wife. Who are you?" The room spun, and I grabbed the back of a chair to steady myself, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps, my vision blurring with tears I didn't even realize were falling. "I'm Emily Harper," I spat, my voice rising to a shout, echoing off the sterile walls. "James's wife of 12 years, the mother of his children. You're lying. You have to be lying." Rachel's face crumpled, her hands flying to her mouth as she let out a sob, her knees buckling as she sank back into the chair. No, that can't be," she whispered, shaking her head, her blonde hair falling over her shoulders. "We've been married for 6 years. We have a son, Ethan, he's 4. James is my husband. He wouldn't." The waiting room was silent except for our ragged breathing, the other people around us, patients, families, a nurse with a clipboard, staring in stunned silence, their whispers starting to ripple through the air like a wave. I wanted to scream, to grab her by the shoulders and shake her until she admitted this was a sick joke, a scam, anything but the truth. But deep down I knew. The necklace, the way she said his name, the raw pain in her eyes, it was real. James, my James, had been living a double life, with 2 wives, 2 families, 2 lives. And now here we were, strangers bound by the same man, waiting to see if he'd survive the crash that had exposed his secret. The next few hours were a whirlwind of chaos, heartbreak, and revelations that kept coming like punches to the gut. I called my sister Claire, who dropped everything to rush over with her husband Tom to pick up Lily and Max from school. I couldn't face them yet, couldn't look into their innocent eyes and tell them their dad was fighting for his life, let alone that he might not be the man we thought he was. Rachel called her mom, Diane, a shrill woman with a perm and a voice that could shatter glass, who arrived an hour later, glaring at me like I was the intruder, muttering under her breath about homewreckers and liars. I wanted to slap her, to scream that I was the one who'd been lied to, that I'd given James 12 years of my life, 2 children, a home, while she'd been raising her daughter to believe in a fairy tale that didn't exist. But I didn't have the energy. I was too busy praying James would pull through, too busy replaying every moment of our marriage, searching for the signs I'd missed. The doctor finally emerged around 6 p.m., his face grim, his scrubs stained with blood, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. "Mrs. Harper," he said, glancing between me and Rachel, clearly unsure who to address, his clipboard trembling slightly in his hands. "James is out of surgery. He's in critical condition, internal bleeding, a collapsed lung, and a severe concussion. We've stabilized him, but the next 24 hours are crucial. You can see him now, but only one at a time." Rachel stood up, her hands clenched, her chin jutting out defiantly, but I stepped forward first, my voice firm despite the tremor in my chest. "I'm his legal wife," I said, staring her down, my eyes burning with tears I refused to let fall. "I'm going in." She didn't argue, just sank back into her chair, her mom whispering something in her ear as I followed the doctor down the hall, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic and fear. James was in the ICU, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred, his face pale and bruised, a tube down his throat, his chest rising and falling with the rhythm of the ventilator. I stood by his bed, my hands shaking as I touched his hand. The hand that had held mine through labor, through birthdays, through a decade of life. "How could you do this to me?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face, my voice breaking. "How could you do this to us?" I didn't get an answer, not then, not for weeks. James slipped into a coma, and the doctors weren't sure if he'd wake up, his prognosis a grim shadow over everything. Rachel and I took turns sitting by his bedside, a silent agreement neither of us wanted but couldn't avoid. I learned more about her life with James than I ever wanted to. How he'd told her he was a traveling salesman, how he spent half the week with her in a condo on the other side of Chicago, how he'd been there for the birth of their son, Ethan, while I was at home, thinking he was at a conference in Boston or Atlanta or God knows where. She learned about me, too, about Lily and Max, about our house in Evanston with the blue shutters, about the vacations we'd taken to Disney World and the Grand Canyon, the kind of memories that were supposed to last a lifetime. Every detail was a knife in my heart, a reminder of how blind I'd been, how I'd trusted him while he built another life behind my back. But the drama didn't stop there. It never does it? A week after the accident, Diane, Rachel's mom, decided she'd had enough of our uneasy truce. She showed up at the hospital with a lawyer, a slick guy named Richard in a cheap suit with a comb-over, who claimed Rachel was James's legal wife, that their marriage superseded mine because it was more recent. I laughed in his face, a bitter, broken sound that echoed down the hallway, drawing stares from nurses and patients alike. "More recent?" I shouted, my hands shaking as I waved my marriage certificate, the one I dug out of our safe the day after the accident, the paper creased from how tightly I gripped it. "I've been married to him since 2011. We have 2 kids. You think some piece of paper from 6 years ago changes that?" Richard didn't back down, his voice smooth and oily as he handed me a copy of Rachel's marriage certificate. Dated 2017, with James's signature scrawled at the bottom. "Illinois law is clear, Mrs. Harper," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. "A subsequent marriage can invalidate a prior one if the first spouse is deemed to have abandoned the marriage. We'll be filing for sole custody of James's assets and decision-making rights while he's incapacitated." I felt the floor drop out from under me, my hands trembling as I stared at the document, the date mocking me with its cold black ink. "Abandoned?" I whispered, my voice rising to a scream. "I've been raising his kids, paying his bills, keeping our home together while he's been lying to us both. You think I abandoned him?" The argument exploded into a full-blown shouting match right there in the hospital hallway. Diane screaming at me to get out of my daughter's life, Rachel sobbing into her hands, and Richard threatening legal action while nurses scrambled to intervene, their voices sharp as they warned us to calm down or leave. I didn't care. I was too angry, too hurt, too broken to stop. But before it could escalate further, a doctor stepped in, a stern woman named Dr. Patel, who ordered us to take our family dispute outside, saying James's condition was too fragile for this kind of stress. I stormed out, my chest heaving, my hands clenched into fists, Rachel's cries echoing behind me as I pushed through the hospital doors into the rain. The story didn't stay quiet. It never does when the truth is this messy. By the next morning, the local news had picked it up, splashing headlines like "Chicago man's double life exposed after crash" across every screen in the city. Reporters camped outside the hospital, their cameras flashing as I tried to shield Lily and Max from the chaos, pulling them out of school for a week to protect them from the whispers and stares. I had to sit them down, my sweet, innocent kids, and explain that Daddy was in the hospital, that he might not wake up, and that people were saying things about him, things I didn't know how to make sense of myself. Lily cried, asking if Daddy still loved us, and Max just clung to me, his little hands gripping my shirt like I was the only thing keeping him safe. I held them, my heart breaking, promising I'd always be there, even as I felt like I was falling apart. I thought that was the worst of it, but the drama kept coming, each revelation more shocking than the last. 2 weeks after the accident, a detective showed up at the hospital, a gruff man named Detective Malone, with a notepad and a look that said he'd seen too much to be surprised by anything. He pulled me aside, his voice low, his eyes sharp as he dropped a bombshell that made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Harper, we've been investigating your husband's accident, and it wasn't an accident. Someone tampered with his brakes. We're treating this as an attempted murder case." I stared at him, my mouth dry, my hands trembling as I leaned against the wall, the hospital hallway spinning around me. "Murder?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. You think someone tried to kill James?" "We're looking into it," Malone said, flipping open his notepad, his pen poised. "We have reason to believe it might be connected to his domestic situation. Do you know anyone who might have wanted him out of the picture? Maybe Miss Rachel Harper, or someone close to her." My mind raced, my heart pounding as I thought about Rachel, her quiet tears, her desperate need to believe James loved her. Had she known about me all along? Had she planned this, hoping to get rid of him and claim whatever life insurance or assets he had? Or was it someone else, Diane, her overprotective mother, who'd been glaring at me like I was the enemy since the day we met? I don't know," I stammered, my voice shaking. "Rachel, she's as shocked as I am. But her mom, Diane, she's been hostile. She might have, I don't know." Malone nodded, jotting something down, his expression unwritable. "We'll look into it. In the meantime, if you think of anything, or if anyone contacts you, let me know immediately. This get dangerous, Mrs. Harper." I spent the next few days in a haze of fear and paranoia, jumping at every phone call, every knock on the door, wondering if Diane or someone else might come after me next. I hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Karen who specialized in messy divorces, and started preparing for the legal battle ahead. Custody of the kids, division of assets, everything. Rachel did the same, and soon we were locked in a bitter fight, our lives dissected in court, while James lay in a coma, his secrets laid bare for the world to see. The drama reached a new peak a month after the accident. When James woke up, I was at the hospital, sitting in the waiting room with a coffee I hadn't touched, when Dr. Patel came out, her face a mix of relief and exhaustion. "He's awake," she said, her voice soft. "He's weak, but he's asking for you, both of you." Rachel and I walked into the ICU together, an uneasy truce, Ethan clinging to her hand, his big blue eyes wide with confusion. James was propped up in bed, his face pale, his eyes hollow, monitors beeping around him. He looked at me, then at Rachel, his hands trembling as he tried to speak, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Emily." "Rachel, I can explain?" "Explain?" I shouted, my voice echoing off the sterile walls, nurses glancing at us nervously from the hallway. "You've got 2 wives, James, 2 families. You lied to me for years, and now someone might have tried to kill you because of it. What the hell do you have to say?" Rachel was crying, clutching Ethan, who was staring at James with a mix of fear and longing. "You told me I was your only one," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "You said you loved me, that Ethan and I were your world. How could you do this?" James tried to speak, but his words were slurred, his body too weak to handle the confrontation. I love you both," he croaked, his eyes darting between us. "I didn't mean I never wanted." I didn't let him finish. I turned and walked out, Rachel's sobs echoing behind me, my hands shaking as I called Karen from the hallway, telling her to expedite the divorce papers. I was done. Done with James, done with his lies, done with the life I thought we had. Rachel stayed, her voice pleading with him as I left, but I didn't care. I had my kids to think about, my own heart to heal. The investigation into the accident took months, and the truth came out in a way I never expected. Detective Malone arrested Diane, Rachel's mom, for tampering with James's brakes. She confessed, saying she'd found out about me a month before the crash and wanted to protect her daughter by getting rid of James, hoping Rachel could claim his life insurance and start over. Rachel claimed she had no idea, and I believed her. Her shock was too real, her pain too raw, her tears too genuine when she heard the news. Diane was sentenced to 15 years, and Rachel moved away with Ethan, starting over in a small town in Wisconsin, far from the mess James had left behind. I got full custody of Lily and Max, sold the house in Evanston, and moved to a new neighborhood in Oak Park. A quiet place with tree-lined streets and a park where the kids could play without whispers following them. I threw myself into teaching, into being the best mom I could be, into rebuilding a life that didn't revolve around James. He survived, but he lost everything: his families, his job, his reputation. Last I heard, he was living in a rundown apartment on the outskirts of Chicago, working as a delivery driver, trying to piece together what was left of his life. I don't care. I don't hate him anymore. I don't have the energy. I'm too busy raising my kids, grading papers, going on coffee dates with a kind man named David, who makes me laugh in a way I haven't in years. That car accident on I-90 didn't just expose James's double life. It exposed me, too, to the strength I didn't know I had. I survived the betrayal, the scandal, the heartbreak, and I'm still here, standing taller than I ever thought I could. So if you're listening and you've been through something like this, know that you're not alone. You're stronger than you think, and you'll get through it, just like I did. It's not easy, but nothing worth fighting for ever is.